So now that
Yeah.
you've been an engineer for a long time and you're a senior engineering manager at the moment, and you've been in the profession, you started at the time when the hype cycle was really, or when the boom was really getting started. You
Mhm.
rode that entire wave, and now we're seeing a much more mature and consolidating market. Looking back, I got to ask, man, what's harder, learning to code or getting hired as a coder?
Oh, no doubt getting hired. Hands down.
Welcome to Easier Said Than Done with me, Zubin Pratap, where I share with you the tens of thousands of dollars worth of self-development that I did on my journey from 37-year-old lawyer to professional software engineer. The goal of this podcast is to show you how to actually do those things that are easier said than done.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Easier Said Than Done podcast. And today we have a guest that you've actually met before on my show. And I've been on his podcast, the Develop Yourself podcast. Absolutely go and check it out if you're an aspiring developer. It's got years and years of real practical wisdom and genuine industry insights in there. But I've got Brian Jenny with me here on the Easier Said Than Done podcast today. And we have a big announcement for you. But before that, hi, Brian. How the heck are you, man? It's good to see you.
I'm doing real good, man. Thanks for the really nice intro there. I'm so used to be on my podcast and asking questions. A little bit nervous now.
We've done episodes before, so we're all friends with this kind of stuff. And hey, we've got a lot of Mexican food and Iranian ice cream behind us, so we've got a long history, dude. Like, podcasts are the easiest
Man,
part.
that was a great night. That was a really nice night.
That was a fun night in LA. Anyway, look, Brian, let's get the audience what they sort of what they're asking for. Now, you've got one heck of a story, and you've been very public about it. You've been very open about it on the internet.
Yep.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? You became a coder in your 30s. You chose to go to a boot camp. Tell us about that. When, why, what was happening in your life at that time?
Yeah. And I am going to get a bit candid with the story. And the reason I do that is because it's helped me in my life when I hear other people share their stories, because I always felt like a real outsider to tech. The way I got into tech was very unique, I guess you could say. I struggled with addiction throughout most of my adult life, and I was really going down a really bad path, drugs, crime. It was like a bad rap video. And eventually I had an intervention like on TV, crying and drama and screaming and all that kind of stuff. And fast forward a few months, and I'm like thinking, okay, I got a real job, quote unquote. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do with all this time? I had no clue what to do as an adult with all this time. I stumbled into coding, essentially. Part of my duty at this place I was working was to update the website, stumbled into coding. I'm like, this is nuts. I had zero clue this is how the web works. And I'm like, I want to do this all day long, and which I did. And then I found out you can actually have a really nice career doing it. Fast forward some more learning, going to coding boot camp, and just finding people that could give me all the bits of information I needed, and kind of bumbled my way into my first job.
As we all do.
That's the condensed version right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that is a condensed version, because I know the real life detail is so much grittier and harder and more painful than everything. And I was having a conversation with Clement Meliski from Algo Expert yesterday on
Love
the
that guy.
podcast, and yeah, he's a great guy. And we were talking about, we condense these stories and everyone looks at the highlight reels and they don't realize it's the tip of the iceberg. All the pain is actually concealed away from you. It's like software engineering. You abstract away all the hard stuff. So that's one heck of a story, man. Give us a sense of timeline. Now, you were how old? Which year was this? When did you do your boot camp? Give us a sense of the timelines of this.
Yeah, it's all a blur. It's funny. I'm one of those people. Some people like count down the days since they've been sober or something like that. I never did that, and no shade to people that do. It's just a part of my life that I've always been a bit ashamed of and kind of tried to forget, which is also why I hadn't really opened up about it for years until I was like pretty established in software. And then I realized, you know what? This is not only an interesting story, I think people could benefit from it. When I share it, people tend to. But I was 30 when I got sober. This was around 2012 or 13, somewhere in that timeline right there. I know it's been at least 10 years being sober, which also tracks with the amount of time I'm spent in software, because they're very tightly coupled.
Correlated.
Yeah. And I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is an important part of this story, because I have the luxury and the benefit of being around software developers. I was also doing ride sharing at this time for Lyft and Uber, in addition to doing an office job. And so I get to meet these people in my rides that would give me these nuggets of information that would just get me a little further along. And at some point, I'm like, I should go to a coding boot camp. I was telling students where I worked, I said, if I was you, I'd go to a coding boot camp if I was your age. And I'm thinking, well, why don't I take that advice, right? And then I found like the first one that popped up like on my phone or whatever on the internet. And I'm like, cool. And I went down in person and I talked to the guy. He was a kid. I mean, to me, he was 25. I'm like, geez, I'm 30 with 2 kids. This
Yeah.
dude's like a kid, and he just sold me. I was already sold. I'm like, I want to do this. I'm already doing it, right? But I'm like, how do I get like the part where people pay me to do it? I had zero clue how to go from like Code Academy or writing HTML and CSS on a code editor at the time, Sublime Text or a Notepad. How do you go from
Right.
that to getting these crazy salaries I hear about? And ultimately, they showed me the way. They didn't really teach me a ton, but they definitely showed me what I needed to do next.
So this was 2012, 2013 that you went into the boot camp, would you say?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so this was the very beginning of the boot camp era because that really started off. I mean, around the time Lyft and Uber started off, which was 2009 to 2011 is when those apps really started to sort of serve the public.
Hmm.
I remember MOOCs and bootcamps started, I think, 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I think even Clement and I
Sounds
were
right.
talking about it yesterday. I think it starts about 2012. So you were right at the first stage of a new innovation. And just to put that in context, it's pretty much Christmas 2024 now.
Yeah.
That was almost 15 years ago. That's a oh sorry,
Yeah.
almost 13 years ago. I beg your pardon. Almost 13
Yeah.
years ago.
Close
That
enough.
is
Yeah.
yeah, close enough. That's a decade and a half ago. That's a long time. So now that
Yeah.
you've been an engineer for a long time, and you're a very senior engineer, you're a senior engineering manager at the moment, and you've been in the profession. You started at the time when the hype cycle was really, or when the boom was really getting started. You
Hmm.
rode that entire wave, and now we're seeing a much more mature and consolidating market. Looking back, I got to ask, man, what's harder, learning to code or getting hired as a coder?
Oh, no doubt getting hired. Hands down. That was way more difficult. I was actually in the boot camp I was in. It was like a front end, purely front end boot camp, which was at the time like
Hmm.
you could do that. You could literally learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and like some jQuery and
And
get a
get a
job.
job. Mm,
And
yeah,
one of the guys was a CS grad, and I was really intimidated by him. Super nice dude, and I've still kept him in touch with some of these guys to this day. But he was in there; he's a computer science grad, and I'm like, "What's this dude even doing here?" Right? And
yeah,
he wanted to get more practical because he learned all this conceptual stuff, and he didn't. He was having trouble getting a job. I got
yeah.
hired 8 weeks into this boot camp, and didn't even really finish it. I just went because I was like nervous to be on my own. I just wanted this community around me to help me as I got this new
Yeah.
job. And this dude
And you'd
took a
already
full
done a bit
year,
of coding before the boot camp, right? Sorry
a
to jump
ton,
in there, but
a
I think you
bunch.
told me. Yet, so the boot camp wasn't where you learned to code, it is where you learned to get hired as a coder.
Essentially, the biggest thing there, and I don't regret a dollar I spent there, and I continue to invest in myself in education. But the thing
Mhm.
I used to be a little resentful, if I'm being honest, because I'm like, they didn't teach me anything. What did I pay these guys for? But here's the thing. The one thing he said to me, which was worth the money I spent, which was at the time a few $1,000, which was all my life savings, by the way. That was I spent literally my
Big
savings, like
risk,
everything I had. Big risk. At the
huge
time,
risk,
though, I had
huge
nothing
risk.
anyway. So I'm like, okay, I got this
Yeah,
little bit of money I saved up. I'm gonna burn it and throw it here.
yeah,
And I'm like, well, what's the worst that could happen? I learn this skill, and then they can't take a skill away from me. Like I'm
exactly,
thinking, to me,
exactly,
it was a no
100%.
brainer. Honestly, I'm like, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose the skill. So,
Yeah,
but the thing the guy told me is like, Brian, why aren't you applying? I said, because I'm not ready, man. And he's like, dude, you have to like, and he sat me and I said, I want you to come in here. You're going to sit down with me and we're going to apply to a bunch of places. And I'm like, okay. And that just kicked off this thing. And then I got, the rejections coming in and then became a game like, oh, I'm close. I got to get it. And I did. And I nailed one.
exactly. Well, and that's the story, man. I think people just think it you magically learn to code and you magically get hired and offers come pouring in. Even
Yeah,
Clement and I were talking about it, and he went, to top boot camps and top math school, Ivy League math education, and then eventually made it to
that's
Google.
right.
But he's like,
Yeah.
it was so hard for a long time because, and this is what people don't realize. We were talking about this at the start of the show: is they see the coding, they see the learning to code, they see the job. They don't see all the darkness that was in between that and all the rejection that you had to learn from. And this is the point I really want people to understand. Don't let the marketing BS out there say, hey, focus on this shiny thing called coding,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's not enough to get hired as a coder. It was okay 15 years ago, 12 years ago to do less and get by because it was a
Mhm.
growing market and there was a desperate demand for coders. But I can promise you this, in this day and age, the market's matured, companies have gotten more sophisticated. Doing what you did 15 years ago or 13 years ago, we're not going to get the same result today. Like I went to a boot
Yeah,
camp for a week and a half in 2019,
that's
and
right.
that was
Yeah.
at the peak of boot camps, right? They were just everywhere. And
And
I
you went to a
realized they
top-notch
were
one too. You went to, like, one of the
I
best.
went to one of the yeah, I went to one of the best,
Yeah.
and I left my family here in Australia. Went to San Francisco again, like you. I my startup I'd lost six figures in my startup, I took money against my mortgage, 54 grand, I remember, and I went to San Francisco for 4 months to do this boot camp. I left after a week and a half, lost $9,000 and came back home. So like you, it comes from a place of I've got whatever I've got to lose is really not worth keeping, but what I've got to gain is worth having. And you've got to
Yeah.
be willing to sort of take that risk, and just go really hard, because like you said, no one can take the skills away from you. So let's go,
That's
let's analyze this, because you do Parsity, which I know you
yeah.
market as a boot camp, but it's not really.
Mhm.
And I do Future Coders, which is entirely about the personal coaching, what I call the anti-bootcamp. let's
Yeah. I
let's
like that.
consider, why is it that boot camps resonated with so many people, especially career switchers like yourself and like me, though
Mhm.
we were 6 years apart. 23,000 people graduated from boot camps in 23, and there were only 3,000 that graduated in 2013, right? So that shows you the kind of growth of boot camps, like
Oh
exponential.
yeah.
Why was it that boot camps seemed to be the right idea for so long?
It was this mental model I think we have of the idea of a boot camp. We think of guys in the military. That's our thing. We think like some program that's like so fast. It's going to give you some wild transformation in this really small amount of time. And so
Right.
you're thinking, oh my God. So I'm going to have a pain of 3 months, which like the typical boot camp was sold to you. I was like 3 months of like
Yeah.
torture, mental torture. And by the end though, you're going to be getting more money than you could ever imagine. And it seemed almost like too good to be true. Like, wait, that's really it? Like, I just got to suffer for 3 months. First of all, even if that
Yeah.
was true, most people can't suffer for 3 months because they're terrible
No.
at keeping
And
track
they
of
have to
anything
give
even
up
more
their
than a week.
jobs.
Oh,
Right.
yeah,
And
oh
they
yeah,
have
you
to,
got to give up
it's
your
like,
job. That's the crazy part too. I didn't go to one of those because I'm like, there's zero way I could do that. I've met
right.
people do it. I don't really understand it, but everybody's situation is
Yeah.
different. So I was like, there's no way. So I went to one that was super part time, only on the weekends, and it was kind of self paced. It worked
Oh.
out great for me actually. So, but that I think
A-
that was
And
the
so
big allure to it, right?
and so that was again at a time when the market was new, and anybody
Mhm.
who could write some code, who could sling some code, as you call it, would get hired, because it was a new market. We didn't have sort of the established levels we do now. And the alternative to computer science for your 80,000 degrees or whatever it is was very attractive, to do something in 90 days. But let's fast forward to this day and age, 2024,
Mhm.
2025. AI is a new thing as well, with the last 3 years. Can you get good at any career in 90 days? Like, what do you think? Hi, if you want a no BS insight into how to change your career, whether to code or something else, and how to actually get job opportunities in tech, then please subscribe and like. It's no BS because I have zero incentive to mislead you. I just want to help you and give you tons of value so that you will consider working with me to get to your next career. Take a look at the description text below to learn more about the training I offer. But I do post content here regularly, and by subscribing and liking and hitting that notification bell, you will get to know when I post new industry insights for you. You'll also know within about 3 seconds if you want to learn more, but at least you won't miss out. Oh, and please follow me on LinkedIn too. I pretty much post there every single day. Just look for my name, Zubin Pratap. All right, so please like and subscribe to this channel, and let's get back to the episode. Can you get good at any career in 90 days? Like, what do you think?
I mean, I'll say this, like, since I went to that boot camp, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on education within my career. So when I really look and kind of calculate, if I had like a tally of all the books, courses, programs, mentorship things I've done in order to maintain myself in this career, like honestly, just to keep afloat, I had
Yeah.
to supplement my own education, not just with time, but like with actually paying people. Like, hey, I don't know the basics. At this point, I got to do a job. I'm like, I don't even know. I didn't know how little I knew. I remember
Yeah.
one day that the manager said something about big O notation. I wrote like a triple nested for loop, crashed our
Right.
system. There's also no peer reviews at the time. And to me, I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, this works, right? Like, who cares, right? This is all free. No. And so, and then I get introduced to these new words, and I'm like, oh, I'm way out of my depth. And I thought, if I want to advance in this career, I can't just be somebody that's just like a coder, a code bot. Like, I could see already that wasn't a recipe for success. When I saw what the managers
Right.
were doing and knowing, they were involved in the business aspect, they were leading, they were leaders with or without the code. The code was
Yeah.
simply a part of the business function they did. It wasn't like their whole entire personality or their whole job function. They were much more than writing code. And I thought that's not only where the
100%.
money is, but that's where more fun is too. And like, I want a long, fun career in general. I don't want to just be
Ex-
like trapped in my little code box where all I do is like be the best coder. So I'm like, I'm never going to be the best coder anywhere. There's too many really good
no.
coders for me to be the best at any major company.
and it's too vulnerable a position. And when I was at Google, like the most technical, the absolute code jockeys weren't necessarily the ones that got ahead. In fact, very rarely did they get ahead, because they
Yeah.
often sort of end up stagnating or being really bored and frustrating in the corner of the world that they occupied. The people who really did well, who really grew up in the ranks and sort of had influence and impact and leadership, were the folks who knew how to do enough code to get the job done. But beyond that, we're also understanding about how the business works, right? And I think that's what's changed. Sort of neatly segues to my next question to you is, in the last decade, when there were startups just everywhere, like just
Mhm.
exploding with startups, right? That's what 2007 onwards was. I mean, for God's sake, the iPhone came out, what, 2007, 2008? Like,
That's crazy to
Dropbox,
think that. Yeah,
Uber,
you're right. Yeah.
it's not that long ago. It's 15 years ago,
It's
16 years
really,
ago that all these
yeah.
things came out. And with that boom, anybody who could code could get a job. But now in this decade, everything's changed. So from a macro perspective, in terms of hiring practices, you've been on the hiring side in tech. I've been on the hiring
Mhm.
side in tech and in multiple industries. Every industry's changed. Why don't you take our listeners through why, when it comes to career change, you need to understand hiring, and what are hiring managers looking for today that is totally different from 10, 12 years ago?
Oh man, I mean, do you remember getting interviewed like few years ago? And like, you had a bit of a different story than me. Like, you went to Google and some more high growth startups. I was more like in the mid tier companies, but I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so we tend to have a lot of competition.
Right.
But my interviews went from like get to know you, essentially like a vibe check, and like so just like in person. Also, they were all in person, and I'm in the Bay Area, so I have the great luck of being in the epicenter of tech. So I'd go all over the Bay Area and go to the in person meetings. And I remember a person actually offered me, they nearly offered me a Node.js job, and I asked the guy, "What is Node.js?" for a senior position.
Nice.
I mean, this was the craziness back then. It's like, who shows up in person at the interview? It might only be three people. If two of those guys, I got what the first job I had, one guy had like a criminal conviction and he couldn't get the job because of that. So I got the job.
Right.
It's so wildly different now. I mean, like your buddy Clement, he has a whole service based on helping software engineers beat interviews. The interview circuit, I just finished this 7-round interview, right? I mean, how
Yeah.
long was your last interview? How many rounds was your last
uh,
interview? I'm curious.
Six, I think. I don't think I've ever had a tech role that was less than 6 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, this is how large the Bears got, and I don't mean this to scare people at all. I mean, I actually have grown to love interviews, and I have some sort of odd relationship with interviews. I see them as a winnable game, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
totally.
people aren't just looking for people that can code. First of all, because now with AI tools, like anybody can sit down and code. I've been a hiring manager and I've hired people, and just because somebody beats the like algorithm portion, if they're like,
Nah.
I'll just be honest, if they're really weird or have like
Yeah.
serious trouble communicating or say something off color or ask weird questions like when's the first, what's how much can I get paid here? Weird things that let you know, like, I don't care how good you code, you can't work here. So
Yeah.
they
It's
not
not
only
the right
change
fit.
with, I think, more behavioral like questions that we care about, but also like, yeah, the emphasis on coding and this just the pure vibe check, that kind of days are gone, I believe.
Oh, 100%. And here's the thing. This is what I really want people to understand, is that the code changes too. Like, okay, frameworks come and go and all that, but the fundamental nature of building software is not different from what it was 40, 50 years ago, as far as I can understand it, right? It's still, how do you write good code that scales, that handles the business requirements, meets those needs, and is maintainable, and other human beings can maintain it after you're gone, right? So
Yeah.
and it has to be commercially viable. But here's an interesting thing that happened. So I was in India recently after a very long time, after 13 years, sort of visiting some family. And I was at a railway station. It sounds like a slight digression, but it's not. Okay, bear with me for a moment. I was at a railway
Curious.
station when I was a kid growing up in India. At any railway station, on the platforms would be these guys in red shirts who were porters. For a little bit of money, carry your suitcase in the head or whatever, up the
Mhm.
stairs, and across the multiple 10 tracks or whatever it is. They'd help carry heavy things around. I couldn't see a single one of them this time. Right. And I asked somebody at the station master, I'm like, what happened to all those porters when I was a kid? They were everywhere. And he's like, wheels on suitcases. And I'm like, that was one of the most analytically
Damn.
sound answers I'd ever heard. Right. And the
Wow.
second thing was escalators. Between
Jeez.
escalators and wheels, the need for physical brute force wasn't there. Doesn't mean luggage is not required. It
Right?
just means
Yeah.
that the nature of moving luggage around has
Mhm.
changed, right? And I think it's
Fundamentally.
exactly this fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
I think it's exactly the same with software engineering. going forward, software engineers are not the ones that can just write code. They're the ones that can build products with code. And I think that's a big shift from the startup days, And here's a second thing. What happens when a market booms? It attracts a lot of competition, right?
Hmm.
What happens when there's a lot of competition? Hiring managers have a problem. What used to attract 40 applications is now attracting 500,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So what
Jeez.
do? You come up with filters.
Yep.
That's
Stupid
all that the
filters.
DSS, stupid filters, but you need a filter, right?
You need
And
something. Yeah.
so you need something.
Yeah.
You're not going to look at 500 applications. That's not feasible.
I'm
And
certainly
then
not. No. Yeah.
I've never done it. Like, it's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. It's just, I mean, even if I spend 6 minutes on average per application, that's 3,000 minutes. That's a couple of days without going to the
Yeah.
bathroom. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so for me, the more I analyze that and I look at LinkedIn, right? The easy apply button. What has that done? All that's
Oh my
done
God.
is
Yeah.
make 100,000 people apply for jobs they're not qualified for. All these changes in the market means that hiring practices have changed from 12 years ago.
Hmm.
Right? But so 40% of the students in my inner circle program, I only work with a handful of them every year. 40% of them are from top boot camps.
Oh wow.
Clearly, learning to code is not enough. Yeah, they've come from
Yeah.
and I'll name them. The triple tens and flat irons, and I had a code had to be employee. Who's like, yeah, I need help. So this happens, right? And
Yeah.
different
Not
people
shocked.
need different kinds of help. Not shocked,
Mhm.
and no shade on those programs. They help a certain kind of, but everything works for somebody.
For sure.
Everything works for somebody. But is it going to work for you? And why aren't you getting the same results as other people? That requires a bit of digging in, right? And that's different in 2025 than it was in 2012. What you need is different, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that overall, in terms of everything that's changed?
Oh yeah. 100%. And that's why I feel like smaller programs are poised to win, because I do see that the cookie cutter open door policy that a lot of boot camps have employed from growing so big that they cannot offer any level of personalization or
Hmm.
mentorship is not going to work. It's also why you see a lot of, like you said, this unfortunate situation where somebody goes to a boot camp, they acquire the hard skill and they don't get the benefit,
Hmm.
right? And then you have people even go to like top colleges. I met a woman that went to UCLA and she was at a boot camp. And I thought, you know, there's something wrong here, because if you're going to a
Yeah.
top-notch school at 19, 20, you're getting all this debt and you're still having to go out and learn the practical side to be
Right.
employable. What is the right choice now for people? So it's really
Right.
difficult. It's a very strange time. But I saw that even back then, the guy that went to a computer science, he got a computer science degree and still was having a lot of trouble getting hired because he didn't know how to actually code. And that was really hard for him when he
100%.
got out to market to say, hey, write some code in front of me. He's like, I don't know. I know some data structures and algorithms on paper, but I
Yeah.
have no clue how to write JavaScript.
Correct. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing in every industry, by the way. I think people may fall into the trap of thinking this is unique to computer science and coding. No, it's not. It was there in the law. Less than 12% or 15%, sorry, less than, 15%, I'd say, of what I learned was actually used by me in my career in the real world. Because
Interesting.
standardized programs, well, when you think about it, standardized programs teach you all the things you need to know
Yeah.
to get the standardized degree, but not all
Hmm.
the things you're going to use, right? But they have to teach you a little bit of everything to meet the accreditation requirements.
Yeah.
And why should a new career only be available to people who don't have kids, don't have a relationship in their 20s? Like, why can't a
Yeah.
30 something year old like you and I, why can't we have an easier way? The reason I tried the bootcamp thing is I thought, okay, maybe that's right for me at 38 or 37. And it so wasn't. And I had to spend so much money, not just the bootcamp fees, but not work. Like, and it was
Drop your
why?
life,
It dropped
go
my
across
life.
continents. That's a wild story. But yeah, it is
Right.
unfair. And I also kind of resent when people say, oh, coding boot camps, they suck, or people shit. Like, I'm like, well, what is people supposed to do if you are 30 and you do have kids and you do want to switch careers and you like coding? What are you supposed to just give up? I mean, like, I don't like that narrative either that I see out there way too often. Like, just give up. Don't learn. And like, so if you did go to
No, it's
school,
not.
you're just screwed. I'm like, that can't be the solution we're offering people.
No, it's an unfair model. And again, just to be very clear with people, not everyone's going to succeed, just like anything else in life,
Like anything
right?
else, yeah.
But just like anything else in life, not everyone's going to get the golden outcome that they're going for. But you're going to see very quickly why that is. And I can promise you it's not to do with intelligence or skill. Like, those things can be acquired. people who don't succeed are usually not able to, it's no fault of theirs, because of their circumstances, put in the kind of effort required because of their context. And what you
Yeah.
and I are trying to do differently is we try to tell those people before they even start, don't start, because your context is
Yeah.
not right to start. If you're working two jobs and you're a single parent of three kids, I'll be honest, it's probably going to be really hard for you just because of time. You're just not going to have the time enough to do it.
Oh
But
yeah.
if you're working a full time job and your partner's working a job and maybe you've got kids, but you can't put aside 20 hours or so a week, 15, 20 hours, yeah, then you just need the recipe, right? Then you just
Yeah.
need someone to tell you, join these dots and you'll get there because you have enough time to do it. But I'm curious to know, Brian, because you have the Power City Bootcamp, and we're going to make the
Mhm.
announcement in a moment. But why is it that the bootcamp model continues to dominate? Why is it that well, now they're starting to shut down because the investors aren't getting their returns? But the bootcamp model, why is it fundamentally, in our view, against the interests of the student?
Yeah. I think about this a lot, and I see that it's become so corporatized that that it seems like they only care about the bottom line, which I understand. I mean, I'm not going to say this is a charity case. I understand you have to make money, but at the same time, to have zero barrier to entry and to have programs that only teach you the acquisition part without thinking about, one, how can we make sure you're the kind of person who's able to actually learn and go out there and find a new career. And so that big transition in boot camps, where we went really from these smaller programs, which actually did seem to have a lot of success, to this other model where it seems like the goal is pumping out as many people as possible. And I'm like, there's zero way this can work. If you take two people in and one person says, I've never used a computer in my life. The other person says, I'm a computer science, major. And they're both in the same class on a Thursday night at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And they're supposed to just get through this curriculum together. I've seen this happen because in addition to being a software engineer, I've worked at boot camps and I've seen this scenario play out tons of times. I'm like, this is a recipe for disaster. Like, there's no way this person can do this. And you do this at scale, and of
Absolutely.
course, at scale, you have what you see on LinkedIn. Tons of people saying this sucks, and no one, this is they feel like they've been scammed essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of the reason why people feel they've been scammed is because they've been given false promises, things like income
Mm,
sharing
big
agreements or
ones.
job guarantees. I mean, there's a reason Harvard doesn't give you a job guarantee. There's a reason why Stanford doesn't give you a job guarantee. There's a reason why
Yeah,
my law school didn't give you a job guarantee. It's because they can't guarantee. No one can guarantee you a job because you're
yeah.
the one applying,
I feel
right? You're the one who's
I feel bad because I actually tried this out. To be honest, at Parsley, I ended it because I came to the same conclusion you did. First of all, I don't like what it does to the relationship between me and the student either. I'm like, now
exactly.
you're incentivized potentially to try to get a refund. I'm incentivized to force you to do as much as humanly possible to get the first job that comes across your lap. I don't like either one of those scenarios. Like, I get that people like don't want to feel like there's some sort of like pressure on me or Parsity to perform. But at the same time, like, it creates the kind of relationship which I don't feel is healthy. And you're right. I can't, how can I tell you what the future will be? I don't have a magic
Correct.
crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where you live. If you live in Alaska, it's going to be much more difficult than if you live in California,
Right. And what if you don't do the work?
And what if you don't do anything?
Like,
What am I
yeah,
supposed to do? Have you on video camera, showing me applying to a
correct.
thousand places, which is a lot of boot camps do. They said, you must apply to 500 applications, put them in this Excel sheet and show me a picture of the application in order for you to get the refund. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's the point of all this?
Yeah, it's funny because gym instructors get this. They'll never guarantee you a six pack ever,
Yeah.
and we won't even think of asking them. But somehow, when it comes to really smart people who want to get into engineering, they're like, "But there should be a job guarantee." I'm like, "How can there be?" And plus, also, like you said, there's an incentive misalignment. If I have to deliver on this job guarantee, I am going to make you do things that may not be in the best interest of your career, your job,
Yeah.
or your mental health. That is the
Yeah,
reality of it, right?
for sure.
I may make you do things like that because I need to deliver this guarantee. Whereas I don't care about your first job. Personally, when I'm working with my students, I give them a money back guarantee. Zero people have taken it so far, right? Because they they see the value in what they do. Not all of them will get the results, but those that don't get the results have said to me, it's because we didn't put in the work. We know that. We just know that. Right.
That's
And
the
that's gonna
harsh
happen.
truth. It's harsh, but it's like it's absolutely true. And I feel so cliche saying this 'cause every time I go back, I think about this a lot. Like, I think, what has separated all these people throughout the 10 years I've been doing this and seeing people? What separates those from those who get it and those who don't? And then I'm like, Is it their degree? Was it their background? And I'm trying to find these things. And the thing I keep coming back to, some people were consistent and kind of kept going and then figured out what they had to do to recalibrate and just applied pressure, steady pressure until they reached this goal. And some people just
Yeah.
completely fell off and just stopped doing what they were doing.
Yeah,
And that's it.
100%. I mean, when I was trying to leave the law and get my first role, and in the company, I was a top 5 percentile performer in a 40,000 plus company. Every single
Jeez.
manager outside the law I mentioned said to me, "Yep, you'd be great in the role. You'd be fantastic. You've got the legal background, you've got the commercial. You'd be great. All right, can you give me a job?"
Mhm.
No. 3 years, Brian, that went on.
Oh my
Three
God.
years in the company, more than 53 times within the same company, whereas a top performer, 53 times I got rejected. That's
Wow.
what people don't talk about is just the
Yeah.
amount of effort it takes to convince someone to give you a role. And career change, that's what it was. That was career change. That's how I learned how to do career change. So when I was switching to tech, I had all that learning of switching away from the law into business roles
Um,
behind me, right?
so you
Huge
had some
advantage.
expectation already. You're like, okay, I kind of get that this is going to be
100%.
like, no one's going to, because me, like looking at you, I'm like, oh, he's a lawyer. This probably, I know it wasn't, but if I
Oh, people
hadn't known
assume
you,
that.
I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
no wonder he went to Google. It's probably super easy. He's a lawyer and just like walked on to Google. Simple, right?
Nah, it was all that rejection that made me realize it didn't matter what I knew. What mattered was whether the hiring manager could defend hiring me to other people.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's
the big
that's
one.
what matters. Like you and I know, we hire people and we need to explain
Yeah.
that decision to others when we do. Like
Oh
it has
yeah,
to make sense. It has to add up, right?
yeah.
All of the applicants have the skills. So, let's talk about what you and I are doing now, right? Because it
Do
comes
it, man.
down to we're trying to aim for a truly transformative outcome for people beyond just helping them secure their first job. Because we know lots of people in engineering and tech who are unhappy with their jobs. So clearly, that's not a guarantee of happiness. That you're a techie is not a guarantee of
Yeah.
happiness. So it's not about the first job. It's about the transformational outcome of building your career. So why don't you tell
Mhm.
folks, Brian, what you and I are doing to help people, regardless of what stage in life they're at, to truly have a shot at that? What are we doing?
I can't wait, man. What we're going to put together is something called the Inner Circle. Zubin and I are going to partner through Parsity. You can actually check it out, parsity.io/inner dash circle if you want to see what we're cooking up. But it's going to be a transformative, very personalized program to not only help people with the skills acquisition and the job part, but I think one of the most important parts, which is what I'm really excited to pair with you on, is getting the person ready to do this. I mean, that's the huge thing that everybody's missing right now. Everybody is missing this massive step. We're going to go much deeper in this program. And it's going to be me and you working with these people one-on-one throughout this time.
And I think just to add to what Brian's saying there, what's really important is Brian and I are both people who didn't go the traditional computer science degree. We are career changers, okay? And some of the worst advice I ever got in my life on changing to tech was from computer science folks who are hardcore coders who had never changed career
Oh
because
man.
it's two different things, right? It's
Yeah.
two different things. Learning to code and changing careers, two different things. Now, Brian and I have done both. We know how hard it is in the trenches. We now know why firsthand, we know why learning to code is not enough. Maybe it was 13 years ago, it wasn't enough, and I was moving 6 years ago, and it's definitely not enough now. But more importantly, like Brian said, there are many stages to this, guys. You've got to prepare. All right. It's like the analogy I tell my students is everybody focuses on the moment when you jump out of the plane when you're going skydiving. Okay. That's not the important bit. The important bit is when you're packing a parachute. Okay, that's the
Yeah.
important bit. You've got to pack the parachute. Then you've got to make sure the plane is right. Then you've got to ascend to cruising altitude. Then you jump. Okay, you don't just go straight to the jump stage. And that's
Yeah.
what Brian is talking about when we say we need to work with the individual to prepare them for the journey. Are you going to learn to code? Of course, because you need to. But that's not
Yeah.
going to be enough, is it? No. So that's why we're going to help you for 12 months. We're going to take you from whatever stage you're at, whatever your starting point is, to preparing you for the journey, giving you a customized, not just coding plan, but a market approach and a market strategy plan that you need to do under our supervision and guidance. And then we will walk you through all the steps. There are 7 steps to go from wherever you are now to getting your first developer offer. And it's not just about the offer, is it, Brian? It's about the career. Tell them why we need to think long term about the career.
Oh yeah. Your people always forget this. Like it's the game just started when you got hired. All I can tell you is that when you get the job, this is where the game really begins, right? It's going to span decades. There's a guy that at Parsity, he got hired at 40 or in his mid 40s, actually. And I'm like, he has another 20 years, most likely, of working. This is a long time. You do not
Yeah.
want to get into this career and then end up a year in a precarious situation. I switch jobs all the time. And you want to be able to have these options. That's why we get into tech in the first place. Most of us, we want options. We don't want to be stagnant. So, in order to have options, in order to have the kind of career trajectory which you really need and you ultimately want, you can't just be like, I know how to code and that's it. I'm just going to coast. Like, you need to be prepared to go in there with the mindset, like, I'm here to learn. I'm going to use this job as a foundation. And then also have this like growth mindset, or I kind of hate that now, it's overused term, but this mindset of like, I'm going to now look
Yes.
for what's next. What's the next thing I need to figure out to go up to the next piece of this puzzle? And where do I want to go? Do I want to go into leadership? Do I want to go
Right.
really deep in the technical side? Do I want to just stop at senior engineer? These are all things you should think about, or else you're going to find yourself kind of given a career path instead of actually forging a career path somewhere.
Absolutely. And what this really boils down to, folks, is don't obsess about the first job. That's just the first step. All right. We need
Yeah.
to show you how to take control of your career, especially in the modern era. And this is not just about tech. Layoffs happen across sales, marketing, recruitment, HR, blue collar work, logistics. It happens everywhere. Okay. If you don't know how to stay relevant in the market, how to generate opportunities for yourself, how to do well at interviews, like Brian says, treat it as a learnable game. If you don't know how to do this, you are not taking control of your career. You are not future proofing your career. You need to know not just the coding stuff, but the career management stuff. So you always have options. That's why there's that old saying, it's better to teach a person to fish than to give them the fish, because teaching you to fish is all about the optionality and the self-reliance for the rest of your career. That's what we're trying to do in this new Parsity Inner Circle program. We're bringing the Future Coders Inner Circle program and the Parsity program together so that Brian and I can walk you guys through from A to Z of your career management strategy, where learning to code and becoming a developer is a part of it, an important part of it, probably the part that you're
Mhm.
most focused on, but it's not the most important part for your career. It's the first step in a longer career. So, Brian, with all that said, what kind of person do you believe should choose something like the Parsity Inner Circle program versus a bootcamp? By the way, bootcamps are great. If it's right for you, go ahead and do it, right? If you think it's right for you. But it's not the only way for you to get to your career. So, what kind of person do you believe, Ryan, would get the most success by coming to the Varsity in a Circle program?
Yeah, I think about the kind of people that one I want to work with, but also that I think would have the most success here. They're going to be people that have some sort of career, that have worked somewhere. They know that's not what they want to do. They say, I'm interested in tech. I've dabbled in it a little bit. You've maybe explored Code Academy, or maybe you're even like into something like the Odin project, or you're on free code camp or something like that. These are
Yeah,
people that tend to do really well. Also, here's a weird one. If you're a musician too, I don't know why musicians tend to be overrepresented. They end up being the best.
100%.
They really are. If you're a musician that's on Code Academy right now, listen to this. You need to apply. I mean, straight up, you're probably going to be real, just like the best. But
Yeah,
people that kind of have dabbled a little bit in code and they have grit. Like that is one thing that it's really tough to teach, and that's actually even on the site right now. If you go there, you'll see at parsity.io/inner/circle. If you go there, you'll see that it says no experience is required, but you need to have grit, because this is going to be a taxing roadmap that you're going to embark on here. And if you have that mindset, like, yeah, this is not going to be easy, but what's at the end of this program is going to be a massive transformation. So if you have that mindset, you're not in for a quick buck. When I ask people, why you want to learn to code? And the only thing they say is money, it makes me apprehensive, because I honestly have not seen that work out too well. So those are the kind of people probably aren't going to do super well in a program like this. But if you have a realistic expectation of what it's going to take for you as a person to do this, and you've dabbled a bit, you're probably the perfect fit. You're probably a person we want to talk to.
yeah. 1000%. Love that you use the grit word, because it's a big word in my world. It is truly important. The other thing I want to say is all of this started out from the conversation that Brian and I had about the
Yeah.
anti-bootcamp model that I was kind of evolving in the future coders in a cycle. And why is that important? It's because I don't believe any of us truly know how long it's going to take us. Okay, I don't know. I doubt that 3 months is going to work for most people. Maybe it'll work for somebody with a computer science degree. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's fairly infrequent, right? But in general, I say give yourself enough time, be patient, be consistent, be gritty. We will tell you what you need to do. You don't need to know the answers. We will tell you what you need to do, when to do it. We'll take away all the decision making, none of the overwhelm. All you need to be prepared to do is pay that emotional price, that sacrifice, that grit requires of consistently working and being outside your comfort zone for up to 12 months with us. That's a long time, folks, but more than enough
Long
for
commitment.
you guys to make the transformation. Yeah. So if you're truly committed, you're going to not be worried about the fact that it's could be up to 12 months. You're not going to worry about that because that's what commitment looks like. If you're put off by the idea of anything over the 90 days, then maybe this is not for you because you're not
Yeah.
really ready yet emotionally to play the long game. And we, both Brian and I, believe in the long game, not just for your first job, but for your career. Okay. That's why it's more of a coaching program. Think of a sports coach rather than a sports boot camp or a fitness boot camp. It's not that. It is a coaching relationship that takes you from where you are to where you want to be. So, with that said, Brian, where should people go? Now, you mentioned the link previously. I'll put it in the show notes, but just tell them again where they can
Yeah.
go to book a call with us.
Yeah. Parsity.io/inner-circle. Check it out.
Yep, go there and you can read about it a little bit. Check out Brian's podcast, Develop Yourself. Check out my episodes on YouTube as well on the Easier Said Than Done podcast. And if you go to parsity.io/inner-circle, you will see a way to book a call with Brian or I, and we can have a chat, right? We can have a chat about whether this is right for you. One thing I can promise you is that we won't pretend we can help you
Yeah.
if we don't know how to. Okay, that's an important thing. We're not going to accept everybody into the program. Brian and I have agreed that it's going to be the anti-bootcamp for another reason. We're not looking at big scale like the bootcamp, right? We're not looking at,
Not at all.
hundreds of people, over every month or whatever. None of that, right? We're never going to get to 23,000 people, with this. We
Never.
don't
Not
want
this
to. We don't
lifetime.
want
No.
to. Not in this lifetime. We
Yeah.
don't want to. We want to do a few people for a very long time so that we know you'll get the results. We know we can give you the personal attention you deserve. And we both work full time as engineers. We get the satisfaction and the growth that comes in coaching and transforming your life. So, in many ways, it's the anti-bootcamp, okay, in terms of the personalization of the curriculum, the period of time we expect for you, the kind of person we're looking for, and the fact that not everybody is going to just be invited in. We won't pretend to help you or that we know how to help you if we don't know. We will tell you we're not the right people for you. That's why we need to speak to you. So, if this sounds like the kind of thing that you're ready to commit to and that you're ready to explore, definitely go to that link and book the call, and you can speak with us and we will have that conversation honestly and transparently with you. Anything else
Oh,
you'd
yeah,
like
for
to say
sure.
to them, Brian?
You summed it up real well. Yeah. I mean, if we're going to work together for 12 months, we should both like each other and think that you're actually going to
Yes.
succeed, or else it would be a very fun 12 months with it. But I'm looking forward. I've talked to hundreds of developers over the years, a lot through, these kind of calls. And I'm sure you have too, Zubin. These are really fun to do. And even if
Yeah.
you don't choose to go into the program, a lot of times they can like expand your mind, or at least help you kind of understand which direction you probably should go into. So I'm looking forward to chatting with people out there.
We do. And I'm glad you mentioned that, we don't want to spend time, a year of our life. I'm at 43, 1 year of my life is an expensive proposition. So I want to make sure I
Oh
enjoy the
yeah.
people I'm spending that with.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah, so that's going to be an important part. Well, everybody,
Yeah.
you have the link. Brian, thank you for being on Easier Said Than
Thank
Done. I'm
you.
excited about working with you. I think it's going to be a really interesting and rewarding 2025 for us. And I think we're going to have a lot of impact on a few people that changes lives. And that's fine by me. I don't need to do the big numbers. I'm not the vanity metric guy. I just want to
I
really
hear
change a
you.
few lives.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, have a great Christmas break. And folks, for those of you who are booking calls with us, we look forward to speaking with you. And it'll be a pleasure to see whether we can help you. All right. Take care, Brian.
See ya.
Do it. Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.